get into an interesting panel discussion tonight with Janna Willoughby-Lohr, the owner of Papercraft Miracles. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Janna, for coming in to share your insights.
Thanks for having me.
As a way for all of us to get to know you and Papercraft Miracles more, would you mind sharing the inspiration behind creating your business?
Sure. So it's a long story, so I'm going to do like the short version of it. When I first went away to college, I thought I was going to be a poet, and I had a scholarship for that. And as soon as I got there, I looked at the course catalog to pick out what I was going to sign up for, and I saw that they had all these classes in paper making and bookbinding. I was like, I didn't even know you could take classes in that, let alone that they had them here. So I went and met with the teacher. I'm like, hey, I love this. This would be so cool. I want to take all these. And she told me to take this class called Artist Books and Illustration. And an artist book, for those who don't know, the form and the design and the words and the materials and how you interact with it, what it sounds like when you open it, what it feels like when you open it, all works together to make one bigger concept or a bigger idea. And as soon as I learned about that, I was like, well, I have been wanting to do that kind of thing with art and with writing my whole life. I just didn't know what to call it. So I signed up for that class. At the end of that semester, I went and met with my advisor, and I'm like, hey, these are all the classes I took. What major am I working toward? And he goes, those are all electives, so nothing. And I was like, well, shit, like, I'm here on a scholarship. I can't have wasted an entire year of school. Like, I can't do 5 years. What am I supposed to do? And he could have been a total jerk and not cared and said, just go major in communications, who cares, whatever. But he didn't. And he was like, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I want to be an artist and I don't want to be broke. How do I do that? He said, you should do that as your major. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's not a major, or everyone would take that. And he said, we have this major called Integrative Studies, and you can make up your own major. I said, you already know what you want to do. Go do it. Spend the rest of your 4 years figuring out how to make money as an artist. And so I did. And I called it Entrepreneurial Creative Business Arts, where I integrated entrepreneurial studies and creative art together as one course of study, because I was like, I can't really take business and art, because selling art is not like selling any other product. Coupons don't work, right? So once I'd made up my major, I had some kind of idea of how I was going to integrate all these creative things I like to do together. Beginning of my junior year starts, and 3 weeks into the school year, my mom passed away on Friday the 13th. And I was like, is there a person making a movie about my life right now? Like, did that just happen? Seriously? And then 4 months later, on what would have been her next birthday, my dorm burnt to the ground with all of my stuff in it while I was in it. And I was like, no, really, where's the camera? Like, is this actually my life right now? And long story short, after those experiences happened to me, I started making a lot of artist books about my experience and dealing with grief, and dealing with trauma, and learning how to come back to life after you think you're going to die. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned from losing all my things in the fire, it would have been my mom's 55th birthday. And like, I'm a weird kind of numbery person. So knowing that it happened on her birthday and she would have been 55, I was like, this is not a coincidence. Like, she made this happen to me for a reason. I need to learn something from this. So the first lucky thing, me and everyone else who was in that fire got out alive, and no one was seriously injured. So for 100 drunk college students in the middle of the night, that's a miracle, right? And the other lucky thing took me a couple days to figure out, and it just hit me on the third day. I was like, all of our stuff burnt up. And I looked at my roommate, and she started laughing, and I started laughing, and we started rolling around on the ground laughing, because there was nothing else to see except for the fact that your stuff doesn't matter. You don't need any of it. Not one thing in that building did I need. And there was a lot of really awesome, special, really meaningful things for me in that room, but I still didn't need them. And it gave me this insane, profound joy in just being alive and having enough to survive. And while a lot of the other people in the dorm were really mourning their things, the loss of their things, I kept running around being like, making all this art about like, isn't it amazing that we get to be alive right now? Life is so short. Like, don't you want to seize the moment while we have it? And I started making all this art about that. And I did these show and tell type events where I was showing these books to people and reading the stories and reading the poems that were in them. And the people who were sitting in the events would cry. And they'd come up to me afterwards and they're like, I'm a different person than I was 10 minutes ago before I saw that. Like, totally changed the way I think about myself and my place in the world. And knowing that me making art that like helped heal myself, and then sharing it with other people helped heal them, I was like, what else is there in life than that? So I was like, I don't know what I want to do for the rest of my life, but I want to do that. And I want to do it as often as possible, as intentionally as possible, in every way that I can. And after that was when I was like, oh, now I know what I want my business to be. I want to figure out how to make art like that with other people. I want to help people to say the things they don't know how to say, and to go after the things that they think about at night and are afraid to go after. I want to inspire positive change in the world with the art that I make. And that's why I called it Papercraft Miracles, because it's the miracle that saved me when I literally had nothing. So, it's a very long story, and that's just like the first part of it.
No, thank you for sharing. You're clearly a very artistic person. You studied, like you said, business art, you were a graphic designer, and now you're the founder of your paper art and stationery company. Have you noticed a specific artistic style that you consistently gravitate towards throughout all these years?
I mean, in general, all art that I do is tactile. Like, I don't want to make art that you can't touch it. I don't want to put art on the wall that you're not supposed to interact with. So I think like my favorite thing about making art is sharing it with people. So even when I do make what I call like capital A art that's meant to be in a gallery, I design mainly like really immersive installations or things that you need to interact with in some way, and I involve the viewer as a participant in the art. And I like to get their reactions and like, what did this make you think? What did this make you feel? And then I collect all those so that I know the difference that it's made out in the world. So I guess that, like experiential, like involving people in it, and the art that I make, I work with people.
And you started Papercraft Miracles 20 years ago. What challenges have you faced in your journey as an artist, and how have you overcome them?
What challenges have I not faced as an artist? That's a different story. I mean, initially, being a 20-year-old kid who had just lost my mom and then had my dorm burn up, and then they canceled my financial aid because I couldn't put her on my FAFSA anymore. And all of a sudden I was like, how am I supposed to pay for my last year of school where I'm doing this insanely specialized major to finish my degree? How am I going to do that? Because this is also way back in the day where they wouldn't just give you as many student loans as you could never pay off in your entire life. You actually had to qualify to get them at the time. So I was like, I can't take a whole year's worth of loans. They won't let me. And I was already maxed out. And my maxed out level was $2,500 a year. That's it. It's because I had no money. So being that kid, inheriting my mom's house without a will, 900 miles away from where I was going to school, there were many challenges involved. And because she didn't have a will, it took several years for her estate to get all settled out. And my brother and I was 20, he was 23. He was living in the house here. I was going to school in North Carolina. So we were trying to keep our house from falling apart with no money. We didn't own it, but we were responsible for taking care of it. And I kept getting summoned to court up here for not mowing the grass in like February. It was insane. So there were a lot of challenges like that, like just becoming an instant adult where I was like, well, how am I supposed to like start a business right now? I have to do this. So after I graduated and came back to Buffalo, having to work a day job was crap. I mean, it sucked. It's par for the course, especially it's really like in this world we live in, like any college graduate, you got to get some kind of jobby job when you first graduate, even if it's not something you love, because that's just the world we're in. But working where I did, I got a job at a gas station because I was like, I have this house that's about to fall apart and I need to be able to pay the bills and I need to do repairs on it and whatnot. So I worked like 60 hours a week at a gas station. And I learned so much about running a business by running somebody else's business. So never discount the time that you spend working for somebody else if you want to be an entrepreneur, because it is so much less risk to learn how to run payroll on somebody else's payroll, to learn how to do inventory on somebody else's inventory, and figuring out how to specifically do those things. And they're all things that you cannot learn when you're in college unless you're doing it in a business. So I learned a ton, especially about managing people, because shortly after I got hired there, they promoted me to the assistant manager. And this is so long ago. Do you want to know how much I made as an assistant manager? $7.25, and I was happy about it. Right? This was back in the day. So I did that for 5 years. And while I did that, I was a good enough employee that I negotiated my schedule with them, because I was like, look, I still want to go out and play music. I want to go to events in the evenings. I want to network. I want to do poetry events and things like that I was still doing. And I was like, I don't want to do these closed shifts. I don't want to close the store every day. So they let me only work from 10 to 6 instead of 3 to 11, like all the other assistant managers in the company. And because I had the sway, they were like, we don't want to lose her. I got to do that, and I got to make my schedule work for me. And I ended up like pushing their corporate envelope a lot, and like making them change a lot of their policies, which was cool, to be more forgiving of people who have lives outside of working at a gas station. So I did that for a while. And then I worked at a company that sold body jewelry. I did photo editing for them, which, you know, it was way more creative. I had a comfy chair, I had paid vacation and health insurance. You know, it seemed all right for an artist job. Like, it wasn't, you know, did I love it? No, but it was way better than working at a gas station. And while doing that job, I learned how to take product photos. I learned how to edit product photos really quickly, really efficiently. I learned how to list things on Amazon and how to format photos for different platforms online. I learned all sorts of stuff about how to sell stuff online by working for a company who only sold stuff online. And while I was doing that, I was like, oh, I can use these skills for when I want to sell my stuff online. So all of the skills that I learned working for somebody else are all things that I took into what I was doing. So there were a lot of other struggles of like having to work a day job along the way. And after I had my first son, I ended up being forced to quit my job there because they didn't pay me enough to cover healthcare and daycare to go back to the office full time, and they wouldn't allow me to work from home. Good thing it happened before COVID, because they totally would have let me work at home and I probably would still work there, because I would have been I never would have had the courage to say, oh, I don't need a paycheck, let's just say F it, you know, like whatever, let's do it. And because I was forced out of that, which was terrifying for me after being a total adult, completely responsible for myself since I was 20 years old, to all of a sudden have a building that I bought with my husband. We own a commercial property where we live and we have tenants. And we had a kid. We had a huge mortgage on this commercial building. And all of a sudden I had no paycheck and no health insurance. So that was a huge hurdle on the way to doing what I'm doing now. But it was also like the number one best decision I ever made in my life. It was the hardest one, but also the best one, because it was the first time in my adult life that I didn't have to go to somebody else's job every day. I could make my own schedule and get up and sleep till 10 with my kid if I want to, and then get up and go for a walk outside, and then I could, while he's asleep, I could work on my business. I could, you know, bring him with me to go to a networking thing. I could, you know, go have coffee with a client. I could do whatever I wanted. And so I started building up my business and my Instagram, but also while I was building my Instagram about being a business owner and selling my art, I was like, oh, also I'm learning how to be a mom and learning how to be a mompreneur. And so I started developing this platform for that too. And it really helped grow my Instagram a lot, being like sharing all those very real insights. Like, this is what my day is like. Sometimes I get tons of stuff done, and sometimes I just sit home and teach my kid how to use a spoon. And like, that's what your day is. And showing people that it's not all sunshine and roses, right? Like, this is what real life is like. It's messy. There's goldfish in the carpet in my office. Like, that's my life. And overcoming a lot of those type of hurdles and learning to see the difficulties as you're, it's like when you are hiking up a mountain, or when you're learning to do exercise, or you're learning to run or something like that, that you, as you are working on it, it seems so hard, but every time you go up another mountain you get stronger, so the next mountain is not as difficult to go up. So now it's like stuff shows up and I'm like, okay, let's do it, we'll get there. You learn so much from all the stuff that's really difficult.
And I noticed that Papercraft Miracles is very eco-friendly. Your products are made with recycled materials, you have a solar panel studio, etc. In what ways do you hope your paper art contributes to broader conversations about sustainability within Buffalo?
How do I hope that we make it better? I hope that every person that I meet with, I bring to light an awareness, right? Because nobody's zero waste. Even the people on Instagram, who say that they are like living a zero waste lifestyle. No, you're not. You're on your phone, okay? Not a zero waste lifestyle. Somewhere that phone is going to go into a landfill eventually, right? So it's about having realistic, reasonable expectations, because all of us taking our reusable bags to the grocery store, it's great, but like, it's not going to be the thing that saves the earth, right? All of us caring that big corporations make drastic changes to the way that they operate is going to change the world, right? So every time somebody goes to a fast food restaurant and says, hey, it'd be cool if you could get those little lids that don't need a straw, and puts that seed in there, because for every one person that says it, they think, oh, there's at least 100 other people that think that and don't say it. And same thing in the wedding industry, because we do a lot of wedding stuff. Events industry in general is incredibly wasteful. Conferences, weddings, like all that stuff, so wasteful. You buy all this gorgeous stuff, and then 4 hours later you throw it in the trash, all of it. And getting people to even think about ways they can reduce their impact in doing stuff like that. While you're planning an event, how can you buy things for that event that are used for decor that you also want to repurpose and use as decor in your house after your event? Or could you give those things away as gifts to the guests who come to that event? Or would you, instead of putting like regular name tags, do plantable paper name tags? Not only are they going to make the people at the event talk to each other about how cool it is that the name tags can be planted and that you don't have to just like stick it on your coat and throw it away, but you're making a difference, because all of those people who then got one and learned about it are going to tell somebody else about it. And then that person is going to go to another event and be like, hey, did you know that they have these plantable name tags? Or that person might be planning an event in the future with somebody else and say, hey, I have an idea. We could use plantable name tags, or we could do, upcycle this, or we should ask the caterer if they have a plan for compost, or, like anytime somebody asks about that or brings it up or teaches somebody else that that's even possible, all of that changes the landscape of what we can do to make the world better.
Nice. And finally, Janna, can you share what the most valuable lesson you learned as an entrepreneur? Do you have any advice that you would like to share with students pursuing their own businesses?
One valuable lesson. One? Oh my God. I don't know if I can do one.
As many as you can name, not just
Oh
one.
man. For creatives, just in entrepreneurs in general, the most valuable lesson that I have gotten, the most valuable piece of advice that I have gotten on my entrepreneur journey is done is better than perfect. Because for a lot of us, we're raised being perfectionists. I know that y'all's generation is breaking that a little bit. Good for you. It's great. But it's really a tough thing to break out of, to think that like it has to be perfect before I can put it out there. This art has to be perfect, or this course has to be perfect, or my product has to be perfect. It doesn't. Because if you wait until it's perfect, it's never going to happen. Put it out there, you'll be able to see right away if it works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, you'll know what doesn't work about it and you can fix it. So, make sure that you put thought into it and don't just throw everything out there, but it doesn't need to be perfect before it's done. I worked with a business coach who really drilled that into my head all the time. I'm like, well, I could put this out. She's like, done is better than perfect, girl. Do it. Put it out there. Do it, And she pushed me to put a lot of things out there that I didn't think were ready. And, like, I have a podcast now because I thought it needed to be perfect. And she was like, no, it doesn't. Just put it out there. Do it. And now I have 60 episodes, so it's kind of crazy. But my other advice I would give to anyone wanting to start a business is learn how to be your own biggest fan. You have to be your cheerleader, because if you aren't 110% loving what you're doing, if you aren't fulfilled by it, if you aren't so proud of your idea and wanting to, like, run up on the rooftops and scream it at people like, look how cool this thing they're doing, why should other people care if you don't care that much? Like, don't start a business solely because, I can make $1 million doing that. Don't do it. Because you're never going to make $1 million doing that. Because people do business with people. And people can tell if you're a bullshitter. They know it. They want to work with you because of the experience of being around someone that's passionate about what they do. They buy that way more than they buy a product or a service. They love that feeling that anything is possible, that someone has a dream and they're going for it and they're like, I want some of that because then I feel like I could do that too. Even if it never really inspires them to do anything, every time they see that product or every time they use that service, that's what they think about. So yeah, be your own biggest fan. Do it now anyway, just because the world needs more people who like themselves.
All right, well, that's actually all the questions that I have to pepper you with, but I want at this moment to open up the floor to anybody who might have a question for Janna tonight.
So your journey was full of obstacles. So there might be many times where you thought of quitting. So what held you, from not quitting, like losing mom and then, getting like everything burnt out? How you felt about it? What was that one thought which kept you going? I mean, that's really inspiring.
Like when I feel defeated and overcome, usually the first thing that I do is I go and look at the testimonials on my website, because that's really easy for me to just pull them up and be like, oh, that's right. I actually have a spreadsheet of all the reviews that people have ever given us, positive ones, forget the negative ones, like who cares about those people, right? But all the positive reviews that anyone has said about any of the things that I've done or any ways I worked with them or how they were inspired by me, like doing a talk like this or something like that, I have them all in a spreadsheet. And I will literally be like, oh, I feel sorry about myself today. Oh, so-and-so didn't buy this order or whatever. Whenever I'm not in the zone, I go read those. And I remember like, oh, that's right. I did help all these people. And it's not, sometimes people are like, oh, how to make art help people. But the kind of art that I do, like we had a client whose best friend was in hospice. And she was like, my friend is going to die like in the next couple of weeks. And I have this box of all these photos from her whole entire life. And I don't know who these people are, but she does. And she's still with it enough to be able to tell me who these people are. Can you quickly make 2 copies of a photo album that have scans of all of these photos in them with space next to them so that I can sit with her while she's still alive and write down who these people are and what her favorite memories were with all these people. And I'll have a copy and I can give one to her family. Like, I get to do that as my job. So, like, if somebody says, you can't do it, I'm like, I made a difference for that lady, her friend's family, and all the people that they talk to about. All the people who see that book in her house forever are going to be like, what's this book? And she gets to tell them that story, So.
Yeah, that's so inspiring. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have stories for days, man. So many stories. And I got tea all over this table. Sorry.
That's fine. Anybody else?
Oh, you said you have like 20 years of just owning a business. Is there any like special, releases that are happening this year because of that?
Good question. I don't know if I'm doing any special, hey, it's 20 years since I came up with the idea of Papercraft Miracles. The idea, the name, I had my first official business plan, my first really crappy website on Angel Fire, for anyone who's on Instagram who's old and remembers Angel Fire. So I had that part of the business, but I was not an official business because I had all this stuff to deal with my house and all that kind of stuff. So I just did like stuff for my friends for a long time. Officially, I've been in business since 2013, collecting sales tax, we'll say that. So I don't know if I have any 20-year things, but I am working on a book, a memoir about my crazy life and my crazy stories, but it's more than a memoir. It's like a self-help book in disguise, because I want people to be able to read my stories in a way where they start reflecting on their own lives. So similar to the way I did my show and tell things with my art back in the day, I want people to read this book and say, I'm a different person because I read this book, or I read this part of this book. So I'm writing that book, and I am currently building a course, an online course, for how to start a business as an artist. So those are coming. Those are coming down the pipeline. Probably 2025 when they're all done. So.
Cool.
I got one question. Really inspiring story. You're full of life, and really loved your vibes. So internet has made the world very closer. You can put yourself out there, share your story with everybody, and you have done that. So there is people out there who might copy your idea, something that is unique to you. So how do you deal with that kind of stuff and that sort of people?
I mean, people could try and copy me all day long if they want to. I mean, I've definitely had, I'll post something on Instagram and then I'll see somebody else post something similar on Instagram and I'm like, yeah, good for you. But I don't know. Imitation is the best form of flattery, first of all. It's they're only doing it because they already think that what I'm doing is cool. But I also know that when I was first building my Instagram, when I quit my job in 2016, I had 300 followers on Instagram, which I was like, cool, I got 300 followers. I put a post up. It's got 8 likes. Oh my God, and now I have over 6,000 followers on Instagram. And I was that person that was looking at what other people were doing back then to see what was working, right? So, I mean, if you really work on the differentiation of your company, what do you do that other competition doesn't do? If you really get your differentiation right, there are no competitors, right? They're out there. There's other people who do similar things, but nobody does what you do. And it doesn't really matter what they do all day long, because the people who are going to work with you know you because they found you, they relate to you, they're going to come to you anyway. And if they're like, oh, I saw, it happens a lot with graphic designers, right? So they'll post something and, or people who make a design and then get it mass produced, artists especially. I know this artist on Instagram who makes hair claws. So she'll do a whole design and then she'll send it to a factory, they'll mass produce them. And so often already, her designs have been stolen from her, and they're cheaply mass produced over in China, and then they have them up on Alibaba or whatever. And she has to keep sending them these cease and desist stuff. So she's figured out a lot of cool ways around doing that, where she'll only post the photo of it with her, because they take her designs from her photos on her website. So she will put her watermark right across the middle of it, or she'll purposely put hey, don't steal my stuff, right, a sticker on the picture, right next to it. So it makes it really difficult to take her artwork off of that. So I don't know, really I just don't care. I don't care if people try to be like me. I know that if someone is trying to be like somebody else, they're either afraid of who they really are, or they're trying to be better. And you just got to give some people grace like that. Most people are not doing that in a spiteful way. They're doing it because they don't know how to do something on their own. And if it was there was one time I make these paper plants, and we did one of a paper pink princess philodendron, And they're like these really fancy, like one little one is like a couple $100, a real one. And so we made these paper ones and had them on Etsy, and people kept buying them thinking they were real and then returning them, so it was really annoying. But at some point, somebody on some other website took our picture and then made a post with like 3 real ones and then our picture, and then their caption was like, what girls really want for Valentine's Day, Pink Princess Philodendrons or something like that. She shared it, and then the comments went nuts with all the people being like, that one looks real fake, that one's not real, that one looks fake, blah 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 blah. And people in the comments were going crazy enough that it went viral because it had like a couple 100,000 shares of people sharing this picture of these plants, all because people were arguing in the comments about whether or not my paper plant was real. And a friend of mine saw it, went in all the comments, commented to all the people who said it was fake, and was like, yes, indeed it is fake. It actually was made by this artist, and she tagged my business in every single comment, all the way down the chain. And like all those people, that's free brand awareness, right? So
Yeah.
if you notice that somebody takes your idea or they steal your image, go tag yourself in it. They're either gonna delete it or you get free advertising. And people are gonna know that they took it. So.
That was a very kind friend.
Yeah.
I'm an open book if anybody wants to ask anything else, whatever.
So follow-up question on that. You mentioned about paper flowers. So do you make the paper on your own in your studio, or do you buy it and then do the artistic work? How is it like?
So we actually do a lot of different things. We make papers from scratch for stationery purposes. We make product packaging and that kind of stuff. So we do make handmade papers. We don't typically use those to make flowers. The paper that we use to make flowers, we buy florist crepe, and it's sold by a couple of companies in Italy and a couple of companies in Germany. And there are some Chinese brands too. They're not as good, but they're really cheap. And so we make them out of that, and the paper is so cool because it stretches, so you can actually like curl it and sculpt it and move it and manipulate it in a lot of ways that you couldn't do if it wasn't stretchy paper. My kids call it stretchy paper. They're always like, can I have this stretchy paper? And they take all the scraps. It's so cute. But yeah, so we make the flowers out of that paper. But it is made in eco-friendly ways, and they do like eco-friendly dyes, and technically they're made in a factory, but all of those papers are also made by hand in a factory. It's pretty cool. They look so real. It's so fun. It is
I
so
have
much
one
fun.
question. So basically, actually, I was participating in a competition, and you were my mentor for the Pitch for Perfect. If you know, we had a video call, and I got inspired by you. You know, so we made a paper out of this corn husks, but our goal was to make a tissue paper, not a normal paper. So by the end of the competition, we were not able to reach that tenacity of the paper. So how do you put it that way, that how much should I beat the paper, because we did it in a normal mixer, not in a beater, okay? So what do you think that at what speed we should actually do it so that it actually breaks down the fiber into very small pieces?
So, I mean, getting tissue weight paper is not a matter of short, small fibers. It's a matter of thinner sheets. Because if the fibers are really, really, really short, it won't stay together as a sheet. Because the way that paper fibers are made, they're usually like long and skinny, and when you put them in the paper beater, it pulls them apart, and they stay like long and skinny, and they're floating around in the water like this. And then when you form the sheet, when you pull it up through the screen, they fit back together like this. And then as the water goes out, they start to bond back together, and then after you press it onto the felt, they bond together more. You put them into the press, they press it out even more, and then all the fibers become bonded back together permanently. And if they're too short, you go to take it off the screen, and it's just going to slide apart because they're too short to hold on to each other. I don't know if you ever like took a piece of paper and you fold it a bunch of times to like get it to tear, and you start seeing that the edge is like fuzzy. Those are all the fibers starting to split apart like this. To make tissue weight paper, you need really, really like longer fibers, but you need to make very thin sheets. So you need to put less pulp in the vat at a time. so that when you pull the screen up, there's less material on it to make it thinner. So like, most of the papers that we would make, we would be using like a kozo fiber, which is really, it's kind of sticky, like all on its own. It has very, very long fibers, which probably wouldn't work well for what you want, what your purposes are. But because it has really long fibers, they don't need to be all that close together for the sheet to stay together in one piece. So there's sections of it that are very thin, but it stays together in one piece. So, I mean, it might be a matter of like pulling your sheet with less pulp in the vat after like beating it for a long time. I would try to see if you could do something like a food processor or a garbage disposal to make your pulp instead of a blender, because the blender is going to chop everything very, very small, and you really want something that's going to try to like pull them apart more. And like we make recycled paper in our blend, like big blend they're kitchen blenders, but they're like this big. So we use that a lot for recycled paper, but if I was to put like raw plant material in there, it wouldn't make good paper because it doesn't have like the bulk to fill in the sheet. So once you pull the sheet, if you note it, like if you could hardly see that it's on there, probably thin enough. Like when you make the kozo sheets and you pull it up, you know what I mean? She saw it. We made a dress out of that fiber. And when you pull that sheet up, you can hardly even tell that it's there on the screen because it's so thin. And sometimes you go to get it to come off the screen and it's really annoying and it doesn't want to come off and you have to like sponge the back a lot. So it may be a case where like you'll have to leave your screen down and sponge the back a lot and get your felt super wet on the bottom so that the fibers will stick to the felt instead of the screen, and then press it from there. If you can't get it to come off the screen, there's some things you can do to add like methylcellulose or something. It's like a formation aid that helps like thinner plant material fibers to stick together a little bit better, so they'll stay. It kind of just makes the pulp a little bit stickier. So you could try that too.
So do you put any binding agent? Because last time we made it with soda ash, as a binding agent.
So the soda ash is going to break it apart. You don't want to put soda ash in it. You want to cook your fiber in soda ash first, and then you want to check the pH and then neutralize it with vinegar to make sure that it's pH neutral before you beat it and before you make sheets out of it. Because the soda ash, if you don't neutralize it, since it's a base, it's gonna keep eating those fibers away, and it's gonna dissolve them, and they're gonna be slimy and not sticky.
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so like you want to cook them in the soda ash, like your raw the corn husk fibers. You want to cook those in the soda ash first, and then once they start to kind of slide, you want to wear gloves obviously, but once they start to like slide apart in your fingers. You know, like when you cook asparagus and you go like this on the stem, when it starts to do that, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like smushy and it like comes apart, that's when you know that it's probably ready to be pulped. So then you drain the soda ash, rinse the pulp a lot, and fill it with water, test the pH. If it's not 7, add some plain white vinegar until it's 7. And then stir it all around to make sure that it's all neutral. Rinse, dump it all, strain it all out, rinse it a bunch of times to get all the vinegar and stuff out, and then put it in and make pulp out of it. You might even be able to, if it's really well processed from being cooked in the soda ash, you might be able to beat them by hand too, like because that's how traditional paper is made. It's like you would cook it or ret it. They would rot fiber. They put it in a big barrel with water for like all winter, and it's super gross. And then they take it out and strain it out, and that's how they would make the fiber. They would take that and they would beat it with like pieces of wood or sticks or bricks and stuff like that to beat it apart. So you could kind of, I think part of the problem that you've had is like not neutralizing it, but then also immediately putting it into a blender, which it's going to make it into like very thin pulp. But if it doesn't have enough fibers to hold itself together, it'll just slide right off the screen.
Yeah, that's what happened actually. Yes, very true.
Yeah, and what size of a vat and a screen?
Like this much of big of sheet. Yeah.
how big was the vat that you were using? That you had the pulp and the water in?
It was this big.
Probably get a bigger vat too.
Okay.
Because you really want to make sure that you have enough water in the vat to start with, so that when you add your pulp to it, it can really be like universally homogeneous mixed with the water. Because you want the fibers to kind of be going all over over in the water like this, so when you pull the screen down up underneath them, they all come in together on top of the screen. And if it's not deep enough, the pulp, you can't really mix it well to get your screen up underneath it, so you'll only really get a couple of layers of the fibers together instead of all of the layers of the fibers together. So that might work better. There also are some Japanese molds that might work well. They're designed for making really, really thin papers. They're kind of like a sushi roll. You know what I'm talking about? It's like a little bamboo, like one of those bamboo placemats. It's like that, but that's the screen part. So you go to pull your sheet, and then you put that part on top of it, and it you peel it back, and the sheet comes with it. I can send you some videos of that, but they do. The place that I get paper making equipment from does sell those, and they're not too expensive. But those might work better because they're designed for Japanese paper making, which they make like hanji and kozo and really intentionally thin rice papers and stuff like that.
Okay. So last question. So
Yes.
we are trying to basically, the sheet came out to be in an ochre yellow color, and people are not going to use it if it's in that color, So I want to make it white. So I'm trying to bleach it with the oxygen-based agents. So at what stage you normally add those agents? For you it might be color, right? The color of the papers. For me it is that hydrogen peroxide, which is one of the oxygen-based agents. So at what stage should I add that to my mixture or my mold?
Good question. Well, if you're going to be putting anything like that in the paper, you definitely want to make sure it's neutral, because you're going to fog yourself out and could hurt yourself with chemicals.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. Like they always say, don't mix ammonia and bleach, right? Don't want to do that. So I would do it after you've made it into pulp. So cook it, neutralize it, rinse it a whole bunch, turn it into pulp, and then bleach it. Typically the stuff that we've used that's bleached is bleached with actual bleach. It can be okay for the environment so long as it's neutralized before you rinse it. But you definitely want to
So I don't want to use chlorine, for that.
Right.
That's all the purpose of sustainability, So I don't want to bleach with chlorine. So some oxygen-based agents like eco-friendly bleaching.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how it's used. So there's certain things that we do that are like cotton rag pulp and kozo pulp. Sometimes they're bleached with hydrogen peroxide, but sometimes they are bleached with chlorine as part of the process. But it's not just chlorine, because it's bleach, right?
Yeah.
It's not only chlorine, and because of the way that it combines, as long as it is neutralized before it's rinsed or reintroduced back into the system, then you can neutralize it back into pretty much just like water. But you have to do that first. And always test your pH. You're gonna have a lot of pH strips if you're doing a lot of cooking.
Yeah.
So you gotta use them. I haven't done a lot of lightening the colors myself like that.
Okay.
I mean, I would, rather than trying to bleach the color out of it, because who knows what what hydrogen peroxide is going to do to the fibers. Could also be affecting, the consistency of the paper too. But also, hydrogen peroxide, if also not neutralized afterwards, could irritate people, which you don't want either. So it might be better to go with the color that it is as part of the brand. And tell the story about it. And it's this color. You know why it's this color? Because it's made out of corn. Seriously, and go with it, because they have those bamboo toilet papers, and they're not perfectly. They're not perfectly white. They have those 7th generation paper towels. They're brown. People are cool, whatever, right? And because people associate the brown paper towels are better for the earth, right?
Yeah.
your company could be like, my yellow toilet paper is better for the earth, right? You know, like that kind of thing. So I would go with it rather than trying to change it, because you want people to see your product as an alternative, something that's different. And if you make it look like everything else, they're not going to notice that it's different when they see it on the shelf.
True. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. I love that you want to do this idea and that
Yeah.
you've like put this much effort into like trying to make it. It's great.
Yes.
It's not easy. Paper making process is very hard. If you're curious, I'm doing a project, fingers crossed, this summer with the Olmsted Parks.
Okay.
They are they're working on removing the invasive species from the park.
Oh.
And they do it every year, but they want to use it as an opportunity to educate the public about invasive species and what you can do to avoid them and that kind of thing. So they asked me if I would be able to make paper out of any of these invasive species.
Wow.
So we're doing a project where they're going to remove the plants and I'm going to process them. We're going to make a video of the whole process of how we do it and how we harvest them and, you know, get them ready to cook them in soda ash and do that whole part of the process and then turn them into pulp and turn them into paper. And then we're going to make lots more pulp and bring it out and do a workshop with the community so people can come and make paper out of it.
Wow.
And then they have another artist who is going to make ink out of some of the other plants, and then they're going to do a workshop where they use the ink on the paper, which is really cool.
That's
so,
when is this workshop happening?
the workshop itself is going to be during the Eastside Garden Walk in July, end of July,
Okay.
at Martin Luther King Park. Fingers crossed. We applied for a grant for it, so hopefully we get enough funding and can really like do it how we want to do it. But I will be gathering, like getting the plants from them and doing the actual processing and getting the pulp ready and all that kind of stuff at some point end of June, like early July, because we'll be making them out of the you know those orange lilies, the day lilies, the ditch lilies. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're like, people call them tiger lilies, but they're not.
Oh,
Like the tall orange ones.
Yeah.
They're super invasive. Who knew, right? They're beautiful, but they grow like crazy and they take over where native plants could be growing.
Oh.
So they're going to pull all those out, but they're also really relatively easy plants to turn into paper. So, and the tall ones have really long leaves, so you don't need as many of them to make paper. So we're going to make paper out of those.
Wow.
Probably dry some of the flowers and put the flowers in the paper too, because why not?
Yeah. So I'll contact you in July. That's really nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Join my email list if you're not on the email list already, because
Yeah, I have your email. Yeah.
I'm going to be sending it out to
Yep.
that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Just one last question from my side. You know, exactly opposite of what she asked. Let us say if you want to take the paper, you know, harden it to a point where you can shape it into a bowl or a plate. You know, how do you temper with the hardness? Is it like you just make it thick and just paste it with glue, or you know, how is it like?
There's a couple of different ways if you wanted to make it like that. I mean, paper pulp itself, if it's, you know, a couple of layers thick, it's pretty hard once it's dry, as long as you press it while it's wet. If you just like get a lump of paper pulp and like let it dry all on its own, it's still gonna like break apart because the fibers haven't been bonded back together. So what it sounds like what you want to be doing is like paper casting. There's a couple ways to do it. You can, if you're going to do it by hand, you can form sheets, cooch the sheets onto the felt, press them a little bit with your hand with like another layer of felt, lift them up, put them on the mold, and like let them go into the mold. And if you want it to be multiple layers thick, do multiple sheets on it and then press it like with a towel or something, like to press it into the mold. Sometimes you'll need a release agent to get it to come off the mold. I haven't found that to be a thing. I have gotten all of the molded, casted things off of the molds that I've done them in. We use molds for when we do seed bombs and stuff like that too. So it depends. Like if you want it to be like a plate you could eat off of, you're gonna have to coat it with something, obviously. Unless you intend it to be like a paper plate, right, that you then throw away later, which is, you know, it's doable. So if you wanted it to be something that's like shellacked kind of, or that stays glued together well, You could do it like paper mache. You could do it with like flour water mixture, where you could make a bunch of paper ahead of time. It would be dry, press it, dry it, whatever, rip it up in shreds or strips, and then like dip it in the flour water mixture and like press it onto whatever you want to put it on. Put it over a balloon and pop the balloon like we did when we made globes when we were kids. Hopefully you made globes for your kids. That was the coolest part. So I would do that to like get it to really, form that hard surface. And then after it's totally dry in whatever shape you want, if you want to trim the edges or however, if you want to add some kind of like a coating or a shellac to it afterwards, you could do that. There's a couple of different products you can use for that. You could do, cheapest, easiest, Mod Podge. You can get it in any art supply store. It's a PVA, it's water-based. It's not horrible for the environment. It's not great, but it's, neutral for the environment. As far as stuff like that goes, I would steer away from any kind of like spray shellac or something like that. It's just, that stuff's no good for the environment at all.
Thank you.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, well, I think that pretty much wraps up our night. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
And